All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today, both the guests and our panel participants. And so, just real quickly, I'd like each of them to just introduce themselves briefly, and ladies first. So, Ashley, would you mind just explaining what you currently do and
Sure,
what your position is on Capitol Hill?
sure. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Wilson. I'm from South Carolina. I currently live in DC and I am a legislative director and counsel for the House Majority Whip, James E. Clyburn of South Carolina, my congressman. I'm here and serving the American people and directing his legislative efforts to getting all the good stuff from the federal government to South Carolina. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. And Paul, would you mind going next?
Definitely. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, my name is Paul Dorsey. I'm a senior counsel with Rivian. It's a relatively new car company manufacturing EVs. During my time on the Hill, though, I worked with Congressman Foster as well as Congressman Dan Lipinski, both Democrats from Illinois. Happy to be here and talk about my time on the Hill and how I've kind of gone on from there. Thanks.
And last but not least, Laurent, if you would mind also just giving your background and actually I'll just ask you the follow-up question too there, if you wouldn't mind just detailing your journey to what even brought you to Capitol Hill then.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here speaking with you all today. My name is Laurent Crenshaw. I'm currently the global head of policy for Patreon. Patreon is a membership platform that connects creators with their communities all around the world, and it's most well known as well for providing monthly subscription-based membership models for creators to earn living or revenue based off of the communities that they connect with. I prior to Patreon worked for a couple of other companies, but originally I was on the Hill as well. I served in the House of Representatives for 11 years as a staffer, first in the Whip's office under a prior Whip, Roy Blunt from Missouri, who's now in the Senate. And then also I was with Congressman Darrell Issa for 8.5 years. And for about 4 years at that time, I was his legislative director as well. And so I originally decided to join Capitol Hill to become a staffer right out of college. Initially, I went to Stanford for my undergrad, so out west in California. Graduated when the bubble burst out there, so back in 2002, and really decided, sort of based off of those factors, that I wanted to go to work in politics to see how laws were made and how just the process worked. And I expected to be there for a year or two, and I ended up staying on the Hill, as I mentioned, for over 11 years, just because I really found a calling in helping to serve the American people. As Ashley mentioned, as a staffer, I was with a good office at the time as well, and I also went to law school in the evening while working on the Hill during the day. So it was really a fantastic experience for me, and I can truly say that it has lined me up for the opportunities that have presented themselves since then, including my current role at Patreon.
That's great. And I just want to begin, and I'll throw it open to the group. It's just kind of the question. Look, I think we all know, all having attended and graduated from law school, that typically, regardless of where you go, there's kind of just a few tracks that most people and law students just think about in terms of career-wise. And oddly enough, I don't think Capitol Hill is on a lot of people's mind. So would you mind just, again, throwing it open to the group, just talking about how, what a legislative assistant or legislative director or counsel on the Hill, what that role is, and also why, attorneys are actually preferred for that, and why it's a career choice to consider.
Well, I'll jump in first only because I took the traditional career path before coming to the Hill. So I think I'm a little bit of a unicorn because I did not intern on the Hill. I keep saying that my staffers are going to make me intern because I still get lost around the building and that type of thing. I can't give you a tour or anything. So, but I started my career practicing law in South Carolina in a very traditional sense. I was a litigator for about a decade. And before I came to the Hill, most immediately, I was practicing products liability defense at a big law firm. And so, kind of my transition to the Hill was just because, I was getting to the time where had to kind of decide if I wanted to be a partner at my law firm. And I worked with a bunch of great guys, but they didn't make it look sexy. Like they were twice my age, working as hard as I was working. And so I thought, if there would be a time for me to try something new, this would be a great time in my career. 10 years out, and I just made the leap. I'm kind of like I say I'm a unicorn because it was a complete, almost like a fluke. Like a friend of a friend's husband worked in my current office, my current coworker, and was just like, yeah, we're looking for somebody from South Carolina that's a lawyer to come work on the Hill for the congressman and be his legislative director. Nobody gave me a job description, and I was just kind of like, okay, well, like, why not? I'll try it out. Wanted to move to a larger city and practice there, so it seemed like a good opportunity, and it has been just that. So I took a big career pivot from the traditional sense. I never worked on the Hill before, and a part of me when I'm like talking to folks about like taking this job was like, I feel like you always hear about people basically being born and raised on the Hill. Like when they're in high school and college, they're interning to the interns, and they get out of high school, they go to college, they intern again, and then they, get out of the stroke of luck, get a staff assistant job, and then they kind of work their way up. So for me, I just got a job as an LD, which is like a senior level staffer, and then the pandemic started. So that was also an adventure. But essentially, as Mr. Clyburn's LD, I am his, I guess I'm kind of like his legislative kind of advisor and liaison. And for me, because he's the whip, we have a pretty large staff. So I have the luxury of primarily focusing on his legislative efforts that most impact South Carolina. And I also get a little bit of a couple policy issues, but we have a pretty big team, pretty big policy team. So we kind of split those among about 5 or 6 of us. But I basically just engage with stakeholders. Whatever legislative ideas he has, I kind of take them from start to finish, which is just skills that are really kind of innate to lawyers. I don't think we know this a lot, but we are very well project managers. So, someone tells us what the end goal is and we take it from A to B to Z. And so I think that's a lot of what I do from day to day. A little less counsel, which I'm okay with, because when I do have to be counsel, it's kind of intense because I'm the only lawyer in our office who actually has practiced law. We have a lot of the super smart work full time and go to night law school, like Laurent. So I always get a lot of the things where I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed. This is not.
Yeah.
So I do a little more lawyering probably than just the average counsel, but mostly doing kind of legislative director work.
No, that's great. Paul, would you mind just kind of following up? Like, what is it? Because we just use these terms that they become second nature. But what does it mean when you handle an issue, right, for an office, and kind of like what is the day-to-day life for senior staff?
Definitely. So I was never senior staff actually, so I appreciate I appreciate you insinuating that I made it up that high. But when you handle an issue for an office, basically it means that any bill that comes in that subject matter, any meeting that comes in on that subject matter, you will take the lead and I guess run the traps on the legislation or the meeting. So a lot of people will come in. And if you're like a transportation staffer, that an airline will come in and say, oh, we have this issue with the current law or with this current regulation, and this is how the congressman can help us. And I think going to law school really helps you think about, what does the law actually mean? How is it interpreted? And you can go through kind of the full step-by-step analysis of the law in terms of, what the law says. How is the regulator going to enforce this? And then eventually okay, if this goes to court, how is a judge going to go through this? So there are a lot of people on the Hill that come from other backgrounds, including like masters of public policy, business, things like that, but they might not have the expertise in understanding the holistic view of the law and how exactly the law is going to actually work for people when it comes down to passing potentially, if you're lucky enough to get a bill passed, which is pretty rare.
Yeah, yes, it's that's becoming an increasing rarity when we're all still just arguing about even naming post offices these days. But no, thank you. And you know, I think one thing that people don't probably understand too is, and Laurent, if you could speak to this a little bit, just how much of an advisor and confidant you are to the member, or that you can grow to be, and why, lawyers really are prized because, again, if you could just speak to that relationship and that it's not just explaining policy, but you're also providing recommendations, and all these guys are dealing with tons of policy issues. Anyway, if you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. And Paul, I definitely appreciated what you said in regards to sort of understanding the law from a holistic manner, because I think that that's a really important part of the role of any type of legislative role on Capitol Hill, but especially one where you're, in a position to advise the member. You really have to understand the black letter of the law so that when there are legislative proposals that are moving through Congress or that are out there, you understand what they would do, both sort of as a proposal itself, but then more holistically once it's integrated within U.S. code. If it goes through the process, is passed, and becomes a law, and then becomes regulations that are supporting it, how exactly does that fit together? Is it constitutional? Does it align with the members' core interests and the interests of their constituency that they're representing as well? And being able to speak to and to marry those two parts together is exceptionally important. And so, I think Ashley, the fact that you are a unicorn and who was a litigator and who practiced and then came over to this side is amazing. But it's also, it's also interesting because I think some folks like yourself excel with that transition, and sometimes it's a little bit harder because some people who come from that background then say like, wait, I know the law, the black letter law, and what we're talking about here, and there are a bunch of members and staff and others who are walking around saying all of these crazy ideas. Some of them are constitutional. Some of them sound like they're definitely not constitutional and otherwise are just out there. But your role, especially with your member, if you're with a personal office, or to the committee, if you end up being a council on committee staff, is to really understand the law, understand the members' needs, understand the country's needs, and to somehow try to marry that together, whether it's through policy that you're supporting or through bad policy that's out there that you need to basically help to put the brakes on. That those are all components of the role, as it is to be a legislative counsel, or at least someone who is a lawyer who's working on the Hill.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And Laurent and I worked for the same member for many years, and yes, he had to deal oftentimes with very crazy ideas. And I think that just goes back to the confidant part, that you are counseling them in a certain sense. So Ashley, maybe not in the traditional sense, but just trying to convince them that, or maybe you shouldn't proceed with that at this very moment.
Well, just to follow up on that, that is absolutely true. And I think a lot of it is we are kind of like the gatekeepers for the member in a lot of ways too, because we can kind of a lot of times when people come to talk to their member of Congress, they have to get to a staff person before they get to a member, just because, I mean, at least particularly my boss, and I think this applies to a lot of members, is that they're so busy. They have so many things to do, and so they can't possibly meet with every single constituent that wants to come and talk to them. And so a lot of it is us receiving the incoming and having to weed through what should really be a priority for the congressman, what should be on his radar. And I don't know if this is true for a lot of other offices, but our offices is kind of like you call, we answer type place. So if you want to meet with, if Mr. Clyburn is your congressman and you want to have a conversation with him about something you're advocating for, you will more likely than not get a real human. And so having to weed through all those things to help us prioritize what is most important for him is a large part of the job, which makes us have to be, I think, makes us have to be good communicators. And I think that's something that lawyers are really good at. When I and speaking of the transition, when I came here, I was a litigator. So my clients paid me for a yes or no. It's very black and white. It was,
Mm-hmm.
can I do this? Can I not do this? And do we actually care about what you say, right? But, coming into a role on the Hill, I've come to see that one, anything is possible. And how you have to kind of sometimes be a little more creative and open-minded than I think I had to do in the traditional sense of practicing law, because anything can happen. Like literally, we work for the entity that makes the laws. And
Right.
so
Great
sometimes
point.
when I first started, people would come and say, I have this idea, I want to do this. And in my head, it would be like, nope, 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 nope. Like, I'm just like, expletive note. Like, I'd be like, this is wild. And then I would talk to like another coworker, and he would be like, well, maybe. And so now, we have a really good, a good time with the slow maybe, because anything's possible. So it's helped me as a lawyer kind of pull out my creativity skills, because truly anything is possible here. And it's like, if someone comes to you with an idea that matches what your member wants to do, then it can truly be possible. I also recognize that I sit at a place of privilege by working for a member that is in leadership. So truly anything can happen, which I also wasn't exactly aware of until kind of the last year or so. But I think it really suits lawyers' skills very well to work on the Hill, because it's all of those parts. It's a lot of incoming and having to decide what's important. I don't know. I think about it like sorting through all the facts, right, and figuring out what's most important and having to prioritize. So
Yeah.
And I'll just build on that too. I went from the Hill to a more traditional law practice now, in-house counsel at Rivian, where I do a lot of legislative leaning and regulatory leaning. So government relations style work with Rivian, but kind of the opposite of what Ashley was saying is also true, that, when you work in-house, a lot of times your business client, the business always wants to find a way for you to get to yes. And when you work on the Hill, sometimes the answer has to be no, and you have to say that to people to their face. And I personally am a pleaser. I always want to help out, and it was good experience for me to have to sit down with people and be like, this is just not going to work for the congressman. Sorry. Best of luck, but sometimes that needs to be said. And as an attorney, a lot of times the answer to your client also has to be no, and that's not always a fun thing to say.
No, that's a phenomenal point, and I mean that I can't personally emphasize enough, because, but one thing hopefully in law school, at a minimum, you will learn a little bit of deftness and tact, and being able to say no in a kind manner that doesn't alienate potential constituency, and on the other end too. I mean, Laurent, I know I've seen you personally have to do it countless times. You also have to be a conciliator, and seek compromise, because if you could just talk kind of about that. Look, these members have a million things to do every day, so a lot of these negotiations are actually left behind the scenes to the staff who handle them. Laurent, could you just speak to that just briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of my favorite parts of being on the Hill, was really trying to find a way to get to yes on a bill, on an idea, on something, regardless of the side of the aisle that it was proposed on. If it was a good idea, then, and we could be a part of it, of actually, effectuating positive legislation, then we wanted to figure out how to get it done. And a lot of that involves, really putting the negotiation skills that you develop in law school or otherwise as an attorney to the test, of finding, those areas of commonality, of finding other members or other staffers who you could work with as well. And then also working on coalition building, more broadly speaking. So really trying to find the groups of individuals and organizations out there who could help to, be supportive of the issue and of moving it forward, while at the same time avoiding it also involves some strategy in order to try to, avoid the pitfalls, the many, many pitfalls that were out there that could potentially derail a legislative effort. And, out of that, to Paul's point from earlier, it's hard getting legislation done. We were actually, during my time with Congressman Issa, we were actually pretty successful on shockingly getting over I want to say like over 8 bills out of the House, and I want to say like 6 even signed into law at certain points, or at least having a role there. So pretty successful. But that took a lot of willingness to sit down with any and everybody to try to find the common threads of really what was a good policy idea, and not just good overall but good for the moment, because you could have the best idea and have the best solution, but if the political environment isn't right for that solution, you're not necessarily going to be able to get the traction necessary to move it forward. And so that involves, it involved a lot of really being open to negotiating with all parties, talking with all parties, finding those areas of commonality, and then building that base of support both within your traditional circles and, as we like to say sometimes, like finding the strange bedfellows out there that you could also sort of bunker down with and trying to seize and take advantage at the moment. And so, if you're someone who comes out of that world who really enjoyed the negotiating aspects and elements of it and really trying to find a way to build towards a constructive solution, you can definitely find those opportunities in a number of offices on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. We only have a few minutes left, so I just would like to just a couple final closing questions. Ashley, you truly are a unicorn in the way that you entered the Hill. And Paul beat me to the punch here. And I would just kind of ask, the interesting thing, of course, is that Ashley, you entered in a strange manner, but people probably think, okay, well, what goes after Capitol Hill or being a staffer? I mean, some people do it for their entire career, and they love every minute. Or maybe they hate every minute, but they still do it for their entire career. But what are some of the prospects afterwards for staffers, particularly those who have went to law school? Paul, I mean, again, if you want to go there, what was your route, and like how did you decide to leave to take that up, and how did being a lawyer and your time on the Hill prepare you for it?
Sure, yeah. So I was with Congressman Lipinski for 3 years, I think, and just felt the time was right. Usually, the typical path you see coming out of the Hill will be to do some sort of government affairs, government advocacy work, or lobbyist, if you want to throw the bad word around. In DC, it's not a bad word. So I was given an opportunity to go and lobby for the National Auto Dealers Association, which is a pretty typical career move. I had a number of interviews with other government affairs, so trade associations, advocacy groups, as well as businesses all hire government affairs people to work for them. Since then, I actually moved internally at NADA, the Auto Dealers Association, to doing regulatory work. And then just last year, moved over to Rivian to do more regulatory work, but because it's more of a startup environment, I kind of get thrown everywhere. So I'm doing some like state legislative work, some federal legislative work these days. So, I mean, you have a lot of options, and I know a number of attorneys who have gone back into big law, things like that. So there are a ton of opportunities, I think, available to really anyone on the Hill.
Yeah, and Ron, do you want to, because we only got a couple minutes here, just briefly add on to that? Or...
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to note, and this was something that I at least really took away from my time on the Hill. The Hill is an amazing place if you either are already feeling like you have a passion or a particular area of expertise that you enjoy, that you're interested in, or if you want to become an expert in a particular area. There are few places outside of Capitol Hill where you can basically serve in a role like Ashley, and you'll have people literally begging to come in to tell you how their concept, their idea, their company works, and basically, giving you all sorts of insights both into the systems and into the operations of it itself. So as I saw it, I had a passion for very long time for technology, for like the internet, for telecommunications, for all of these things. And so then, as I was working with Congressman Issa, who happened to have also had a background in technology as well, I was able to really deepen my knowledge and expertise there because of all of the interested individuals, companies, organizations on the outside who wanted to come in and work with us. And so basically, I was able to take a personal passion, couple it with basically an office that also shared and allowed me to pursue that passion and really to build off of it into the career that I've established at this point now. And so, when I left the Hill, I went and over to Yelp as their manager of government affairs and then director of government affairs, and did that for 4.5 years. And now I'm at Patreon as their global head of policy, where I'm not only leading our public policy efforts, but my team also leads our community guidelines as well. So basically, similar to like an LD almost, except we're writing the rules for the millions of people who use our platform every day.
No, that's a great way to end it. And I just want to say thank you to all of our participants. Ashley, Laurent, Paul, you were fantastic.